Last Thanksgiving, your daughter called you twice the week after, just to check in, she said. And you told her everything is fine. Great, actually, staying busy. But here's what you didn't tell her, that you'd had the same conversation with yourself in the bathroom mirror that morning, trying to remember the last time someone other than her called you first. Your kids are worried about you, and you are doing everything you can to make sure they never find out why. Today, I want to talk about the loneliest part of retirement, the part nobody puts in the brochure. I am going to tell you exactly what is happening in your relationships right now, why they are changing, why it feels like your own fault, and the one conversation that fixed it for me. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you are going to understand something about your own silence that might change a phone call you make this week. Here is something nobody tells you before you retire. Your social life was never really yours. It belonged to your job, the coworkers you ate lunch with, the people you saw every single day without ever scheduling it, the small talk in the hallway, the work friend you complained to about everything. You didn't build that social life on purpose. It just existed because you showed up to the same place every day for decades, and the day you stopped showing up, it didn't follow you home. I remember thinking in my first month of retirement that I would obviously stay close with the guys from the office. We had lunch together for 15 years. We texted for about 2 months. Then it slowed down. Then it stopped. Not because anyone did anything wrong, because the thing that connected us was never really us. It was proximity. And when the proximity disappeared, so did the friendship. Nobody warns you about that. You think you are losing a job. You are actually losing an entire social structure you didn't even know you were leaning on. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens quietly, over months, in 100 small moments. A text that goes unanswered a little longer each time. A lunch invite that never quite gets scheduled. A name that slowly stops coming up in conversation at all. And here's the second thing that happens. You start pulling away from the people who are still in your life. Your spouse, your kids, your old friends. Not because you don't love them. Because admitting you are lonely feels like admitting you failed at this. At retirement. At the thing you spent 40 years preparing for. I did this myself. My daughter called one Sunday, asked how I was doing, and I told her I was great. Golfing more, reading more, loving the freedom. None of that was a lie exactly, but it also wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was, I had gone 4 days without a real conversation with another human being, and I didn't tell her that. Because somewhere in my head, I had this idea that a man who worked 40 years, who provided for his family, who had it all figured out, that man doesn't get lonely. That man is fine. So I performed fine. And the performance got easier the more I did it, which is the most dangerous part of all this. Does any of this sound like a conversation you've had with yourself? Not out loud, but in your own head, while you were getting ready for bed or sitting alone with the television on for company. If it does, you are not unusual. You are one of millions of people going through exactly the same quiet adjustment, mostly alone, mostly in silence. Here's what that silence actually does. Your kids sense something is off. They can't name it. You sound fine on the phone. But something feels different, so they call more. Or they call less, because the calls feel hollow. Either way, the relationship gets strange in a way nobody can quite explain. And here's the part that breaks my heart every time I think about it. Your children love you enough to worry about you, but you love them enough to hide the truth from them. And both of those things, happening at the same time, create a distance that neither of you wanted. Does this sound like a conversation you have had with yourself at your own kitchen table? Because if it does, stay with me. The fix is simpler and harder than you think. Let me tell you about my neighbor Frank. 2 years into his retirement, his son started visiting every single weekend, driving 45 minutes each way. Frank thought it was wonderful, told everyone how close he'd gotten with his boy. One weekend, Frank's wife let it slip the real reason behind those visits, and it was not what Frank expected to hear. Frank's son had told his own wife he was scared his father was depressed, that the visits weren't really visits, they were check-ins. Wellness checks dressed up as Sunday dinner. Frank was stunned. He thought he had been hiding it well. He thought the jokes and the "I'm fine, son" were working. They weren't. His son had known for months. He just hadn't said anything because he didn't know how to bring it up without embarrassing his father. So two grown men who loved each other completely spent 6 months both pretending everything was normal because neither one wanted to say the hard thing first. That is what silence costs. Not a fight, not a falling out. Just 6 months of two people quietly carrying the same worry alone when they could have carried it together. 6 months that could have been spent actually talking, actually connecting, instead of performing a version of normal that satisfied nobody and fooled nobody either. Here is what actually changed things for Frank, and for me. One honest sentence. Frank finally said to his son, "You don't have to drive out here to check on me. You can just ask me directly if I'm doing all right." And his son said something Frank never expected. "I didn't know how to ask without it feeling like an accusation." That was it. That was the whole barrier. Both of them wanted honesty. Neither one knew how to open the door. For me, it was different but related. My daughter asked, for the 100th time, how I was really doing. And instead of saying great, I said, honestly, some days are harder than I expected them to be. That was the entire sentence. Nothing dramatic, nothing heavy. And her response changed everything. She said, "Dad, I've been wanting you to say that for a year." A year. She had been worried for an entire year. And I had spent that same year protecting her from a truth she already suspected. We wasted 12 months on a performance neither of us needed. So here's what I want you to take from this. First, stop performing fine with the people who actually love you. Performing fine with a stranger at the grocery store? Sure. Nobody needs your real story there. But your kids, your spouse, your closest friend, they are not asking because they want a status update. They are asking because they love you and they can sense something. Give them one honest sentence, not your whole story, not a breakdown, just one true thing. Some days are harder than I expected. I miss having somewhere to be. I'd love it if you called more. That single honest sentence does more for a relationship than 6 months of performed positivity. Second, rebuild proximity on purpose. Remember, your old social life happened because you showed up to the same place every day. That doesn't happen by accident anymore. You have to build it deliberately. One standing thing. A weekly coffee with one person. A regular call, same day, same time, every week. Not because you scheduled an event. Because you scheduled a person. The structure that used to come from your job now has to come from you, on purpose, every single week. And third, if you are the child worried about a parent, ask the direct question. Not, "How are you?" That gets you fine every time. Ask, "Are you lonely?" Ask it plainly, once. It feels uncomfortable. Ask it anyway. The discomfort of one honest question is nothing compared to a year of quiet worry on both sides. Most people I know were waiting for someone to ask it directly, so they finally had permission to stop pretending. They wanted the door opened. They just didn't know how to open it themselves, so they kept performing fine until somebody, anybody, gave them a reason not to. Your kids are worried about you. That is not a burden. That is love looking for an opening. You don't have to hand them your whole heart all at once. You just have to stop saying fine when fine isn't quite true. One honest sentence this week. That's the whole assignment. Call someone you've been performing for and tell them one true thing. Next week, we're talking about something just as important. What happens to a marriage when both people retire at the same time and suddenly share every single hour of the day? I'll see you then. Pull up a chair.